February 27th, 2015, we're with Mr. Art Staymates from Murraysville, Pennsylvania. Mr. Staymates, I want to thank you on behalf of the American Veterans, West Point Academy, for taking time and giving us this interview of your career with the U.S. military.
Thank you.
I'm going to take you back to when you were in high school. Where did you grow up?
Grew up in Murraysville, Pennsylvania, at Franklin Township High School. Played all the sports there. Graduated from high school with some opportunities to go play ball at Pitt. And on June the 10th or 12th, I got out of high school, and on July the 2nd, I was in the Army. The draft was on. That was in 1943.
Do you remember where you were the day Pearl Harbor got bombed?
Yes, sir. I believe I was in my home, or at the school, because I was probably about a junior in high school or something, and I think we heard about it earlier, and then I come home and my parents kind of impressed me with the importance of this and what it might mean, and then shortly after that my brother left for the Army, and then I knew my number was up a couple years later, and then I went into it.
Did you correspond with your brother while he was in the Army?
Not really, because Mother did, and then Mother was we corresponded with Mother and Dad, and then they would write me a letter and say, here's what Bud said, and vice versa. And so, yes, I corresponded with him indirectly, because I didn't know. He was in the 3rd Armored Division, and I was in the 1st Infantry Division, so we weren't in the same ballpark at the same time.
So you were following the papers, and at the same time, anytime you would see anything about the 3rd Armored Division, which was Patton's
Yes, sir.
group,
Yeah.
you were just anxious to read about it. Maybe there'd be something in there about your brother.
Indeed I was, yes, sir.
How did it make your parents feel?
My father was a very quiet guy, and he was a beautiful, hard-working carpenter. My mother was a great mother, and she was a worrier. No matter what, my brother Bud, we call him, no matter what Bud did or where he was, she was concerned. And then she'd always say, son, I certainly hope you don't have to go in there, to me, before this is over. It's bad enough having Bud in there. So she was continually worried about that.
Tell me about going into the military camp. Where did you do your boot camp, your training?
Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Took my basic infantry training with the 69th Division in Camp Shelby. And that went very well. And then after that, I was put on special assignment to go to the state of Washington and teach boys in the Air Force how to shoot pistols and stuff, because they had to protect themselves in case they were shot down or something, and I did that. Come back from there and then did a couple other short things like that with medics to train them if they were going to Japan, and come back from there, and the 69th was gone, and I was sent to England as a replacement for the 1st Infantry Division when they come in from the Sicilian African campaign. So that was it.
Do you remember when they came in after the campaign in Sicily?
I can't remember a specific date, but they were there at least 6 or 8 weeks before the kickoff for D-Day. And we, in the meantime, had been there. We probably were a total of 2 months taking training. And then the veterans come in from the other war, and of course, they told us they weren't going to have to go there because they had been through all this in the Sicily. And then, of course, their superiors told them yes, they were. And so I particularly watched them closely, because I relished the fact of what they had been through and wanted to learn as much as I could from them, because I didn't know what I was getting into, but I thought I knew what I was getting into, so I learned from them as much as I could.
You remember your serial number?
33689785.
When you were in your basic training, did you arrive there knowing anybody?
Basic training, no, sir.
Anytime during the first year, did you run across any of your friends anywhere from your hometown?
Yes, but that would be in travel somewhere. One of my buddies was on the way to someplace, and I was on the way to someplace. We met in New York for a day, things like that. But no, he was in a different outfit. As a matter of fact, he was in the Navy, and I was in, of course, the infantry. So, but we had fun for a day or two in New York and thought we were smart kids.
Going to Europe, you went across on a Liberty ship, or did you go
No,
across?
so we went across on the Aquitania, which was at that time I think the second or third largest ship in the country, and it was packed with us. I mean, we slept in tiers like this, and you slept for a few hours, and then you went up on deck, and I don't want to say thousands and thousands, but there was a lot of guys on that ship.
Tell me about the bunk beds. How many tiers were there?
6 tiers.
6 tiers.
And I hated it with a passion. Guys would get sick. It was terrible.
Were you at the bottom of the ship? Is that where they had all you guys, down in the
Yeah,
hold?
oh yeah, we were down in the hold, but I tried to get on one of the upper bunks, and I was lucky most of the time to get in either the 6th or 5th one up, but being on the bottom was a terrible place to be.
Tell me about the rations you ate on that ship. What did they do?
I didn't eat much. We got chased by a sub, or at least they told us we were, and they started changing courses, and that's frightened us all, but we went out on deck kind of to enjoy the exercise, and they would say it's time to go eat, and by then my stomach had the seasick thing, and I didn't eat very often, so I don't know what the rations were, good or bad, it didn't matter.
They told you they had to do that zigzag pattern so they could avoid the
subs. Yeah.
Avoid the subs.
Yeah.
Now, did they tell you that you were on a ship that could outrun the subs?
No, sir.
They didn't tell you that. They had the Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mary also took a lot of our
yes,
boys.
Sir, I know that.
And a lot of our boys came back and they were told that the Queen Mary and the Queen Elizabeth was able to outrun the subs as long as they ran that zigzag pattern and the subs couldn't keep up with them.
I never heard that, but we ran a zigzag pattern in the Aquitania, so maybe that's the same thing.
Right. And when you got to England, do you remember what port you came into? Was it in Scotland?
It has 2 names. No, it was in England, and it has double names, and someone at home asked me that one day, and I didn't know, and I have a friend who lives here now but was raised in England, and as a little boy he knew what us guys were doing there, and he told me the name of the place again, and I can't remember. It has 2 names. So it was near the water, because we took a lot of water training, and I can't tell you exactly what it was. We lived up on a hill in tents, and it was terrible. It rained all the time. It was terrible.
So you were in England, and it's 1944, and it's getting close to...
yeah, it's early 40.
Yeah, it's getting close to D-Day.
Yes, sir.
June 6th. Where were you a few days prior to D-Day?
Well, a few days prior, we were out on the English Channel. We had left there on bigger boats, which we later crawled down into LCI, landing craft infantry boats, so Higgins boats. But we were on the big boats halfway across the channel 3 days before. 2 days before, or a day and a half before, we went down from the larger boats into the LCIs, and then from there into the beach on the 6th.
So you came in on June 6th.
First wave, yes, sir.
You guys came in on first wave?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about coming into the beach and knowing that the machine guns are firing at you, and they're hitting the hull of the landing craft. You were on a boat where someone, if it was you, gave an order to jump over the sides rather than drop the gate.
First of all, he started to tell us, the coxswain, I guess we'll call him, started to tell us what he was going to do, and I was watching where these tracers or the machine gun fire was coming, and I said, I'm not going through the front. I'm going to go over the side, but because this is such a serious situation, you guys do what you want to do. I'm going over the side, and I'm going over the right side because the boat was like this coming in, the machine guns were here. If you went over the right side, at least for a little while, you're spared from the machine guns. So frankly, I'm not sure how many, but a bunch of my guys went over the right side with me. And unfortunately, we landed in a hole that had been bombed mistakenly, where a bomb was dropped there, whether they was getting rid of it or what. And we were in about, oh my, a good 8 or 9 feet of water. And with this packed, extra heavy pack, by the way, with everything we had on it.
That's what we call a rucksack?
Yeah. Anyhow, we went down and it was trouble getting up to get a breath. But I only had to probably go in real life, I thought it was a mile. We probably had to go from here to your suitcase before it started up like this. But getting up to get a breath with, now that's, normally your field pack weighs 65 pounds. But that day with the extra ammunition and everything, the extra that you carried on your person and in the sack and around the sack, it was probably an 80-pound sack. But once we get in the water and the water hit it, it's got to be 100 pounds. So of course, as fast as we could unhook it, we're shedding packs in the water, up on the edge of the beach. Our equipment was going in, and we didn't care except the rifle. You kept your rifle. And,
now, what kind of rifle did you carry?
Was
it
M1? An M1 rifle was.
M1. So that would be the Garand.
The Garand. That was our rifle of the day.
And how did the salt water affect the munitions? Were they weren't affected at all?
Yes, no sir. Because we had bandoliers of ammunition across here, plus your web belt was filled with them. We had grenades sticking in our field jacket eyelets, and oh God, we had lots of ammunition. I had a bag full of ammunition too beside that, because we thought we were going to get into a big fight. And so the ammunition, as far as we knew, was good, but listen to this, and I'm sure you know it. We didn't fire a shot. We got in at 6:30 in the morning. They're up on the cliff, and they got the field of view here. We had nothing that would do this. We were totally nothing more than target practice for the Germans. That might be your friend calling. So anyhow, I never fired a shot, nor anybody in my platoon fired a shot, unless we just, for some reason, wanted to shoot up in that direction. I guess shoot at the sky and see what happened. But I never fired a shot. My rifle worked well when I did. I think I probably did fire a shot or two just up in the air to make sure it was, because we greased them well. We had condoms over the head of them, and my rifle worked well, but I never had a chance to use it till finally, by the time we got up over the beach, it was getting dark. It was probably 7 o'clock at night, and only by the fact that the airborne came in up here, and the big ships at sea, an English ship is what we were told, finally got the right type of coordinates. They could fire in instead of hitting us going far enough to start messing up the machine gun nests that were up there. Them, the 88 or the 82nd Airborne, and us, it gave us a chance to get up over the first part of the cliff, which there we were in terrible danger too, because they were dropping grenades on us and mortars were coming in. But we got through that and then got up to where the barbed wire was. Had a terrible mess getting through that. This is all at Omaha Beach, which was dead center on Easy Red, which was a terrible place to be. We got through the barbed wire finally, and then we got up and we had about 20 or 30 yards. We went to the French, what am I trying to say, the French ups and downs of hedgerows.
The hedgerows.
To the hedgerows, but that was all mined, and we lost some good people in that area. Then we finally got into the hedgerow about 7 o'clock at night, and finally we were in combat. We saw the enemy face to face. We had opportunities. We found it necessary to start shooting and getting shot at.
Were you up against the Wehrmacht at that point, the regular army, or was it the SS?
In my guess, this would be the Wehrmacht, because they were manning the machine gun nests, and they would have the nest there. And as you know, then they had a tunnel that goes from there over
the trenches.
And so this, to the best of my knowledge, this was mostly Wehrmacht. Plus, we knew that the SS we were told, we didn't meet them yet, what kind of people they were. So we kept looking for them. But in my opinion, I don't think we had any SS contact until a week later, before the first SS contact.
Did the Germans on top of the hill, once you got on top, did they give up easy?
No. At first it was real tough, but then the beautiful part is they had us outmanned. But by the time the 82nd Airborne got their people gathered up, and we started getting our platoons up over the hill fast enough, and then they stopped the cannons because they knew we were there then. But by then, we had the best small arms firepower. Now they had the 88mm cannon, which was murder, the best cannon in the whole world. But right then and there, we had control of the firepower. It was just a matter of, we needed more numbers, but they were coming in from the 82nd, they were coming up over the hills, so we were able to fight our way. The first wave in was able to fight our way into positions where those of us who were left were able to help these other guys back up over, and then we had enough manpower to maybe be 1-on-1 or just 2 against us to 1 or something, and we took care of ourselves pretty well.
You know, it's always depicted that there were a lot of young German soldiers, that they started pulling the kids out of high school, and that you would find in some reports that coming into Normandy, you found yourself fighting against 16 and 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds. You remember seeing any of that?
Not at Normandy, but shortly thereafter we run into what we thought were kids that were younger. I was just 2 months past 18. I just had turned 19, and we run into where I called them kids. Looked like they were 17 or 18, and probably as well trained as you could be because they'd been at it since they were 12 years old. But they weren't ready for us. And yes, we did have that, but not at Normandy. That happened. We were into France a little piece before we started hitting that kind of competition.
Now, you were in the 1st Division, and the trade name or the nickname for the 1st Division was the Big Red One?
By the Germans at home and by us, but the German soldiers called us the Bloody One. But
Bloody One.
So when the soldiers referred to us in Germany, they called us the Bloody One, but the other people referred to us the Big Red One.
Were any of the men that you were with in the 1st Division, did any of them fight in Africa?
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah, because when we were training with them, these guys said, we're not going over there, we've been through this. And of course, I said, well, you know, good for you guys, you'll be going home. And they said, yeah. And then your top kicker, someone said, you're not going any, you're going to the beach. And they said, oh, they said, you're going, and they did. And I watched them, and they were great, but we were scared stiff. We weren't sure what to do or how to do it. But we learned quickly you're going to get killed anyhow, you might as well get into it. But they knew they were going to get killed because they had been through it. But they also knew how to, the best they could do to avoid that by still going forward, because there's no going back. You can't swim across the channel, and you might as well stand around the middle of the beach and get killed or get into the battle. So I was blessed with learning quickly to do that, but I watched the guys from there, and I'm sure I mimicked them a lot of times by if they decided to do it that way, I was going to do it that way. So it's been helpful to me.
So you're on the beaches of Normandy.
Yes, sir.
You came across to Omaha, then made it up. Do you recall at any time running across deserters or just Wehrmacht?
Our people or deserters?
No, German deserters.
Later, but not at that time.
Not that early.
Sir, not that early. No,
so you're 18 years old. What rank
19.
did you hold? Oh, you're 19 now.
Was a sergeant then, and was really an assistant squad leader. But before that day was over, I was. Now they don't come in and give you promotions, and you just start doing that job because somebody says you're going to take care of it, Lucky, or whatever your nickname was, and you say okay, and so now you're doing the staff sergeant's job. You're a squad leader, and unfortunately, within a few days, I was a platoon leader. I don't know what rank I was because I don't know what they put on the morning reports.
Right.
But I was just another soldier that the guys happened to think could do the job all right.
Let's get back to Lucky.
Yeah, that happened on D-Day.
That happened on D-Day. Did that begin to happen right after you jumped overboard from the landing craft?
No, that happened about up in the French hedgerows. They said, you lucky son of a gun. And I said, well, you know, because they saw what was happening around. Some things I don't like to talk about, like when you would dive in the sand because you saw the machine gun fire coming this way, dive in and hope it went over you, and then before it started back, grew as far as you could and then dive again. Well, unfortunately, one of the guys right beside me, when I dove, and when he dove, he landed on a bouncing Betty, we called the mines that come up and cut you in half, but he landed on it this way. God bless him. Body parts, hands, arms, head. There was you couldn't even find dog tags. It just was mass murder and that's when you knew that you better get into this battle or go ahead and get killed because you don't want to live through that.
Was this a buddy of yours?
Yeah.
And where did you first meet him?
On the ship. We became buddies pretty fast. On the ship going over to D-Day.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah. From Virginia. I'll tell you in a minute.
It'll come back to you. Do you remember when you got home, did you ever contact his family?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you kept in touch with them?
Not really.
Or it was just one contact?
No, I contacted him more than once, and then his wife They didn't have children then, but he had gotten married very young. He was a couple years older than me, but still very young. And then, if I remember right, then one of my calls later, she said that she'd gotten remarried and that she was pregnant, and I said, oh, that's wonderful. But now I'm talking about a baby to a different man and to a lady who has a new husband, and he doesn't need to hear me calling and talking about it. So I think probably the last time I talked to him was shortly after that when I said, if there's everything I can do, you be sure to call me. And I left it at that, and no more contact. His name was, Rollins was the last name, and the first name
Rollins?
Rollins, Rollins, and his first name. See, everybody had nicknames.
Was he a sergeant also?
No, he was a corporal, I believe. A good corporal, probably a assistant leader or the leader of a squad as a corporal, because he had taken ROTC in
university
college. He was a couple years older than me or something. So,
tell me, is Rollins buried in Omaha? Do you know? Do you know where he's buried?
I don't know where he's buried, but I would assume he's in the grave site that they have that the French maintain for us.
Right, that's Omaha Beach at...
Yeah, and I can't say that's a fact, but that's terrible. I never asked anybody. I never asked his wife, but I don't think they shipped home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Did you ever think about that after the war, where he may have been buried, or...?
Well, there was more than one friend. And
right.
Yes, I thought about a lot of them, and I thought a lot about the ones that got blown up so bad there was nothing to bury, and that's what bothered me, because who knows? I mean, I'm working now with some people out of the Pentagon. The Department of Defense sent them up to me because they had 13 or 14 people in the 1st Infantry Division in my regiment and in my battalion to see if I knew any of them, because they're still considered missing in action. And they have since found 3 of them. One of them got shot trying to escape from a concentration camp, from a prison camp. POW.
Stalag?
Yep. And one of the others had escaped, but then was hunted down and shot. And then another one died in the prison camp. So 3 out of, but there's still 10, and these people are doing wonderful work. I got their names, and they call me often, and they're coming to see me again in April. And they spent 4 hours with me, and there was no one in my platoon who was missing in action except if he was totally destroyed. Right. And that's the best I could do for them. And but anyhow, they say, well, the more we can talk about this, the more that you might say a name like Joe Blow or Pete Smith or something would help us to talk to someone else in that division that might have known them too. So they've interviewed me. They met me in Belgium when we were over for the 70th anniversary of the Bulge. And then they asked if they could see me when we got home, if I'd come down to the Pentagon. And I guess being smart or silly or something, I said I'd rather eat a snake than drive through Washington, D.C. traffic to go to the Pentagon. And I meant it as a joke, but when we got home, the first guy, Dr. Ian something, he called me and he said, Art, we'd love to talk to you. Could you spend some time with us? And I said, certainly. And I said, I'm sorry about that driving to Washington. I said, that's no problem. It's an hour ride for me or something. He said, no, we're going to come to you. And I said, no, they said, yeah. I said, I'll tell you what, I'll meet you halfway. I'll meet you in Frederick, Maryland, which is halfway to Washington. And I knew a great restaurant there. And they said, oh, great. So we met and they were with me for 4 hours. And really nice people. And now they have another meeting planned for me in April.
Were they in uniform when they came?
Oh no, they aren't. They weren't in uniform. They're working for the federal government.
Okay.
In the
forensics.
The Department of Defense, but they're working in the forensic department, and they have quite a few. It's not just those 2, but they have quite a few, because when they said it's coming up in April, if anything happened, that something that we were hot on happened and we had to go, would you mind if we sent 2 others? I said, I can only tell them the same story I've told you unless they have new facts that I could consider. And so that's all I know about that.
This is the first time I've ever heard of that unit tracking down people who survived.
That was new to me.
Yeah,
and
I think it's wonderful.
And
I'm happy to see that they're out there and they're trying to bring some comfort to some families who've had questions for more than 70 years as to what happened, to their loved ones.
In Hagerstown, Maryland, we have a small group that has 29 of us World War II vets, some that are able to be there. We meet every Monday, for every first Wednesday of the month, at the American Legion, and I've invited these people up for our next interview to be with me and then be introduced at 7 o'clock when that meeting starts, and spend 20 minutes or so telling our World War II veterans there what they're doing. And then maybe those people would like for you to interview them, and maybe, because a lot of them were Air Force, when they have Air Force missing in action, a lot of them were tankers, a lot of them were other things beside infantry, and maybe they said, oh, we'd love that, so that's being arranged.
Art, I'd like to ask you about a friend of yours that you met coming across on the ship from the States going to England, that you became buddies with, who was in the 1st Division with you. Could you tell me his name?
Is that the one we just talked about?
Yes, exactly.
Wally Hunter.
Wally Hunter.
Wally Hunter.
And Wally is spelled W-A-L-L?
W-A-L-L-E-Y.
E-Y, and Hunter,
Hunter's-
H-U-N-T-E-R.
You got it.
And do you remember where he was from?
Yes, Virginia, but I'm not sure
What city?
what city in Virginia.
Right. And your friend was killed in action
Yes.
shortly after you landed on D-Day, but was it on also June 6th, if you remember?
Yes, sir.
It was on June 6th as well. And do you remember what town in France that could have been?
Well, we weren't in a town. We were still on the beach.
It was still on the beach when it happened, but you were by the hedgerows.
No, we got up the hedgerows, which once we got off the beach, up on top was the hedgerows. So this was before we got off the beach.
Okay. So it was right shortly after you got off the landing crafts.
Yes, sir. Trying to get up to the cliff to help get up over the cliff, and before we got up there, we lost him. Yeah.
Right. And that was as a result of a bouncing Betty?
Well, we called them bouncing Betties. They come up and cut you in half, but in his case, he dove to get out of the way of the machine gun, as we all did, and he landed on one with his stomach, so it never bounced. It just blew him in all of 100 pieces. So,
That was just one of
many.
many good friends that died that day.
And
There were other people in your division. And as we said, when you got off the landing craft, the guys who went to the right, jumped off the side to the right, jumped off with you. You went to the right as well.
Yes, sir.
And that itself could have saved a lot of people by making that decision as opposed to dropping the door on the landing craft.
It just would have been stupid not to do it, because we could see what was coming at us. They were waiting for us to drop the thing, and it was just across the front of the boat. Well, if you're going to do that when they drop the thing, we start running down. There you are. The ducks are running right into the ammunition. So I said, I'm going over the side. You almost make your own decision. It's a big decision, but they said, we're going with you. So that was it.
Let's go a little bit beyond. You're now going for your first objective. What was your first objective that day on D-Day?
I think, frankly, we weren't given a specific objective, but it basically was get up on top and get into those machine gun nests and stop them. And we did that, but only with the help of the 82nd Airborne and ships at sea. I don't think any of us would have ever lived if we hadn't had help from the outside. And it's the same when you say in an infantry there's thousands of people, but there's only probably 2,200 down on the ground infantry. The rest of them are supplied, but we need them just as bad as they need us if we're going to win a war. So those guys are equally important, and that's, I have to look at everybody else in the Army that wasn't in the infantry and say, thank God they weren't, because we need them in the back to help us out, but we couldn't all be in the infantry. But if you're, or in the ground forces, you'd be a rifleman. And if you could avoid it, then you should, because that's a terrible place to be, but it's the only place to win a war.
That first day, when you realized the 82nd was up there also.
We didn't realize it at the time. We were told that they were going to be, and we hoped they would be, but because the planes hadn't flown the day before and the night before like they were supposed to, then all at once you're wondering, well, who's going to bring them in if the planes don't fly? So you hear things, you say, that's wonderful, and then you say, oh, but, are they really going to get in there? And if they didn't, we would have been dead. There's no question. But all of us would have.
How soon did you see anyone that day from the 82nd yourself?
Yeah, once we got up, not during the day. Once we got up on top, then we realized somebody's fighting over there, and we knew it was our people because they're fighting this way and we're fighting this way. And the Germans are fighting that way. So we knew it was our people, and we could tell by when the sound of the rifles, and you can always tell.
Machine guns as well.
Machine guns, and you can always tell if it's yours or theirs.
Right.
So we knew we had help, but we weren't. It wasn't a time schedule. It happened that they were there and we were there, and everything was.
So that first night that you were there, how far in did you get inland? Just
in the hedgerows. We were fighting in the hedgerows, and night came and went, and we were still fighting in the hedgerows. There's no, in the infantry, you don't go to bed at night. There's no place to go to bed. There's no ceiling. There's no bed. And I remember one guy from the Air Force said to me, boy, we had some tough times. He said, that one morning, he said, they told us we had to get out of there and get fast to where we were going. He said, we rushed off so fast. All we had was a cup of coffee and a peanut butter sandwich. I said, I didn't say it to him, but I would have given a bandolier of ammunition for a peanut butter sandwich, and because we didn't have any coffee, or you didn't have any morning and night. We were in combat, and that's
that next day though, when the sun was coming up.
Yeah.
Did you start running across some of the 82nd?
Oh yeah. We knew where they were, and they knew where we were,
And what was the expression when two boys from different parts of the country, one wearing a 82nd patch, the other one wearing a big red one?
We never got close enough to hug them, or they were doing their battle and we were doing our battle, and it was all, let's get this over. And then when the machine gun nests were closed, it was, here we go, the 82nd and us are going now to get the ones that's back there, because when we got that done, the beach was clear. Now the people coming in, well, the second and third wave had been in, but the people coming in the next day, they could start bringing trucks, tanks, ammunition, whatever they wanted to bring, because the beach is clear. It's no more battle. So our job was done there, but now we got a couple thousand miles of France,
to make
Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, and Czechoslovakia to win a war. So.
Right. Now, that day that you were there, the second day goes by, and your next objective, do you remember the first town you came into?
Yes, I do, and I can't say the name of it, and I knew you'd ask me that, but it was a French town, had one of the last something names, and I'm grateful for the memory I do have, but I'm not that sharp after.
Do you own a division book from
Yes, sir,
Division
First
One?
Division. They gave every one of us got one when we left the division.
How well did it depict the history from June 6th, that day when you landed? Is it pretty accurate,
Oh, yeah.
the way it's written?
And I'm reading a book now, I beg your pardon, I finished reading, that Deanna found it and brought it to me. It's a brand new book. It's called The Dead and Those About to Die, 1st Infantry Division, Omaha Beach. And the author was McManus, I believe. Anyhow, I started to read that because I want to know his opinion of what happened on the beach as compared to mine, because see, he's going to know what generals and colonels and so forth, what kind of orders they got, and why we were sent in the directions we were. And that's important for me to know, because lots of times I'm in battle and think, why are we wasting our time with this patch of woods or this stupid looking town or this hillside? You have to think that, because you don't know why. You go whatever checkpoint you're told to go to and take it and hold it till you get the orders. So you go do it, but you're thinking, what a waste of lives. And then when you read the book, you see that they all, thank God, they knew what they were doing, and they were sending us in the right direction to accomplish a total mission. But when you're doing it, you think, what if General Eisenhower doesn't know what he's doing, and he was an amazing general. He did wonderful things, so that was good. Can't tell you.
You only heard good things about General Eisenhower from the men in the ranks?
I heard, everybody hears rumors, but I heard that he had a girlfriend or something. That's not bad stuff. That was, all I know is, yes, as a general, he was, as far as I'm concerned, he's a great man too, good general. Ended up being a good president, helping this country in a fine way. I was proud to be under his control, yes, sir.
Let's talk about that first town. We'll find out what the name was.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
What do you remember about that town? When you came in, was it occupied by Germans? Or did they...
yeah.
Okay, did you have to fight your way in?
Oh, yeah, and they had swastikas and hanging down from buildings, big swastikas and windows that the people had. The French weren't trustworthy. Some of them liked the Germans, and
The women had German boyfriends.
Oh yeah, and we would, they would act like they wanted to help us and stuff, but I always told my guys, be careful, because you couldn't trust them. But anyhow, we got through there, and they are an ally, and we had some terrible battles in there because they didn't want to give up that territory. And by now we're in Belgium, and the Belgian people hated the Germans, and they treated us like kings. I had my first French fry ever in Belgium. I probably hadn't eaten in 3 days, and this dear lady, older lady, comes out with almost like an ice cream cone. It was paper, and then there was these things sticking up. I'm a kid from the country. I never had a French fry. My mother made fried potatoes or baked potatoes. Anyhow, she handed me that, and I said, "What is it?" Well, she didn't speak English. I didn't speak. So I tasted. I said, "Wow!" And the guy beside me grabbed a handful. I said, "Wait a minute!" And then she gave him some. And I said, they were the greatest French fries that I ever had in my life. So when we went back to Belgium this time, I wanted Belgian French fries as soon as we went back for this 70th anniversary of the Bulge. And they were good, but I was disappointed because, see, I was so hungry and didn't know any better and never had one. I thought they were the greatest in the world. They were really mediocre French fries. Now that French fries are an everyday meal almost here. So, but anyhow, she was a wonderful lady and gave us a sheet because the snow was coming, and she gave us sheets off her bed so we could cut a hole for our hands and head, and at least they wouldn't make us any warmer, but they gave you some little
windbreakers.
Well, no, a little better. In the snow, we were in the snow then, it was bad, and that made us give it a little camouflage because the Germans were coming in white uniforms and we were in our olive drabs. We didn't have any white uniforms, so that helped a little.
Now, this must have been way after June.
Yeah, well, the Bulge was way after June. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We went through Belgium the first time.
Right.
And that was just a war like a war, but the people treated us great, and I had my French fry and stuff.
Right.
And then we went from Belgium into Luxembourg. We tore the Germans out of there, and they fell in love with us. Then we went into Germany. Then we took Aachen. Hermann Göring said there was a shortwave radio that one of our guys had picked up somewhere, and Hermann Göring made this broadcast that, don't worry about it, we know the 1st Division's on its way, and we know their reputation, but they will never cross the Siegfried Line. But if they did get across the Siegfried Line, of course, in that direction we were going was Aachen, that was the first major city we came into. He said, the one thing sure is they'll never take Aachen, and if they did, I'll change my name to Schnickelgruber. Well, it stuck in my mind, and later on I had the privilege of talking to Mr. Schnickelgruber often, so we went through that. But anyhow, then we did all that, and now the Germans brought 60,000 troops, supposedly. Göring said they didn't have that many, but the generals were telling them we don't have that many, so they brought whatever they could from the Russian front. And he said it probably was only 40,000. Well, that was still a lot to throw into us, and then they drove us back out. And when we took Aachen and the general surrendered there, I told my guys, man, the war's over. Schnickelgruber said if we took Aachen, that would be it. So I said, we're done. We'll be home by Christmas, because this was in early December. Well, December the 16th, the Bulge broke, and they come back and took us out of Germany, across the Siegfried Line.
You were in Germany already? Yeah,
we took Aachen, was the first major city. Took us back through Aachen, took us across the Siegfried Line, took us back through Belgium, took us back into France, and they were going to drive us back into the English Channel. And then, thank God, our replacements started, because we got beat up bad. A platoon that had 42 men in might be down to 12 or something. And we were getting supposedly trained boys to come up as replacements. And then we got enough replacements in, and other divisions were reassigned from where they were back to help us, because we didn't do this alone. We had great divisions with us on either side. And then we were able to stem that tide, and with this big bulge they made there, which is why it's called the Belgian Bulge, we just broke through that again and took all these towns back again. And when we were over this, where I got the Medal of Honor from the country of Luxembourg, it was because we freed them. We freed them, and they thought that was the greatest thing ever. Then the Germans took it back, and they said they were hurrying to take down the American flags and put swastikas up in the hope that the Germans would give them better treatment than they did before, and they lived under that. And then we come back in and kick the Germans out for once and for all. they couldn't do enough for us over there. I couldn't buy a cup of coffee. Those people just in Belgium and Luxembourg, they just loved us. We stayed at the Hilton Hotel in Luxembourg, and everybody that came in there just...
Did you say the Hilton Hotel?
Yeah, in Luxembourg.
I didn't know they had one back then.
Yeah, it's called, it has a name in front of it, Hilton, in Luxembourg. And it's beautiful, it's relatively new. And we'd come back from whatever we did that day out on the bus and go into the different places where we did parades. And they took us to places where we placed, I was privileged to place wreaths on graves and stuff. And we did all this kind of stuff. And then at night we'd come back to the hotel. Well, the one day we left at 4 in the morning because they were going to have a pre-dawn torch march they wanted us to be in, which is when...
This was what, for the 70th anniversary?
Yeah, this was in December of this year, December 16th. It's where Patton and some of the other tank commanders come in from one angle, and the German tanks come in another, and they had this big battle, and then we, the infantry, come in and help mop things up. And so they had this torch parade because it all started happening at dawn. And we were there probably before dawn, before daylight, and we walked in this torch parade. We carried torches, probably just a half-mile circle up the one street and across and down. But there must have been 5,000 people in this town. The whole little town come out to see this thing. They treated us so good, my goodness. But anyhow, we got done with that. Well, the long story short here is we get back to the hotel that night after we went to other cemeteries and we did this and we did. Get back to the hotel and it's probably 6:30 or 7 o'clock. We have a beautiful dinner, which they had for us every night. Their food wasn't good. They don't cook like we do, but it was nice. And we had dinner. And when we were having dinner, they had the whole one end of the dining room. World War II veterans from D-Day for us, like, and then you look out past that, and out in the lobby I could see people just massing up. And I couldn't quite figure it out. We finished our dinner, come out, here it was, all these people waiting to ask. They didn't interrupt the store dinner, that was nice. They were waiting to ask if they could have your autograph and could you have a picture with my little boy or my daughter or my wife or my son and all that. And I can't say no. And most of the rest of the guys didn't, but some of them just were dead. They went to bed, they were beat.
Right.
I never got to bed till 12:30 that night after getting up. We were on that place at 4:30. I was up about 3 o'clock, never got to bed the next morning till 12:30 because I couldn't say no. And you're signing autographs and your eyes are going like this. But they were wonderful. They made you feel like a king, and that was Luxembourg. It was wonderful. So.
I'm sorry.
Just like Playmates.
Yeah, I have to remember that.
Yeah, I was relatively confident that we would be home for Christmas because Aachen fell and all these other things that couldn't happen happened. And then, needless to say, after I made that big fancy speech, about a few weeks later is when Hitler brought from the Eastern Front supposedly 60,000 troops. Göring said he didn't have that many, it was probably 40,000, but the generals were afraid to tell Hitler. They just said, yes, sir. And so he brought those troops against us, drove us back through Aachen, took it back over the Siegfried Line, took Belgium from us, took Luxembourg back from us, and was back into France, and he was wanting to drive us back into the English Channel, and he was doing a good job of it. But fortunately, we started getting our replacements up because we lost a tremendous amount of men by then. We started getting replacements up, and of course the other divisions, we didn't do this all by ourselves, everybody knows that. But the other divisions got their replacements, and we had a complement of men that could do it, and we had divisions that were ready to do it, like the 29th and the 1st and stuff. And we drove them back again, so we retook all of these places I just mentioned to you, and that's when Bastogne and Butenbach and all Malmedy, all this stuff happened. So it was a god-awful bunch of stuff that happened during this period of the Bulge. And we had been left go. We had been in combat for 171 days. And General Eisenhower told General Andrus, our commanding general, that you got to get the 1st off the line. This is inhuman. They can't stand this. And we couldn't. We were really getting beat up. So anyhow, they took us back and said, we loaded on trucks, went back to WWII, Belgium. They gave us showers, clean clothes, hot meal. By that time it was 9 or 10 o'clock at night. We had a good night's sleep. We were going to have a good night's sleep. We were supposed to get up next morning, get on trucks and go to Paris. We were going to be in Paris for a week or something. So we were all going crazy. This was wonderful. I guess about 2 or 3 in the morning, I'm sound asleep. They come in and said, "Lucky, get your guys up. We're going back up." And I said, "Back up where?" They said, "Back up to the line." I said, "No. I can't go in and tell these guys where." He said, "We're going back up because the 82nd's getting their 101st or 82nd's getting their butts kicked at Bastogne, and we got to get up there. They need help. They're shooting them hanging parachutists are hanging in trees and on barn roofs and stuff, and the Germans are shooting them there and trying to get McCullough to surrender." So here we go. I got the guys up, and of course, let me tell you, we were mean when we got up there, because that was a lot different than Paris would have been. So well, it was a good time not to have mercy anyhow, because it was right after the Normandy massacre. And so we were right back at it, and that was it. We were there till the end of the war, so it wasn't a good time for us.
Tell me, in your company, at that point, how many men, what was your company size, and how many men did you lose?
A complement of an infantry company is always 142 men and 6 officers. Platoon is 42 men. I was in charge of a platoon then. And my platoon was probably down to a little more than half. I maybe had 20 people, maybe 22 or 23 instead of 42. And you get a platoon objective for 42 men, you only got 20-some to do it. And the company from 142 men was probably down to 90-some, maybe 80-some. I didn't run the company, but I saw what was happening. So we were really understaffed, but they couldn't get replacements up fast enough. So
that was my next question. How soon were you going to get replacements?
They would send, every now and then, they would give us a chance to go back, and we usually got first choice because we usually lost the most men. So we would go back, and I remember the first trip I went back, they said, "You get first choice." I said, "Great." So the kids were all there, and I said, "How many can I have?" And they said 6. I needed 60 probably for the whole company, but so I got 6 men, and you try to choose, just from face value, you try to choose guys, and I was pretty lucky, except we made one bad decision. We had one boy that just couldn't stand it, so he didn't last.
Do you remember what month we're talking about? We're talking about January 40.
The Belgian, the Bulge ended about January, first week or so of January. Started on the 16th of December, went on for about 4 weeks, so it'd be middle or late January. And that's when all this stuff came to an end, and we started, now we're going to take back everything that they took back from us and then go on in, and that was really the beginning of the end, because they had nothing to throw at us after that, but we didn't know that, because that was a surprise when they threw that at us. All of our people, the highest ranking officers we had, including Eisenhower, in a book that he has written, it was total surprise that they had that many men to throw at us, which of course killed them, because then Russia took advantage of that. Then when we whipped that, where's he going to go now? He can't take anything from our front, and he can't take anything from that. So the war was over for him, but we didn't know that. I was down in those lower ranks as a platoon leader, but I felt it because the war was getting easier. We were fighting more Wehrmacht than SS. We were fighting senior guys and some youngsters. It was a different fight from then on, and thank God, and it was easier for us.
Whether he was a senior or a 17 or 18-year-old and they were holding a rifle, you knew that they could kill you just as easy as somebody who was 25 years old.
No question about it, yeah.
Was there no mercy? It was either you or them at that point.
I visited the hospital in Washington, D.C., the big hospital there for our wounded kids. And I went down with the father of one boy who lost his leg in one of these recent wars, and a Marine, and I was talking to him in the ward. And then we were talking back and forth, and he was telling me something, and I was listening to some boys talking over here a few beds away. And one of them said to the other one, he said, "Well, how about you guys?" He said, we were given specific orders. You will not fire at the enemy unless they fire at you first. And I didn't say anything. I went on with my conversation here, and finally I said, "Excuse me a minute," and I went over and sat down with that boy. I said, "Son, did I hear you say that you were given orders that you would not fire at the enemy unless they fired first?" He said, "Yes, sir, we were told that." And I said, "So you got shot?" And he said, "Yes, sir." I said, "It's a different war than I knew, because that's like saying, go ahead and get me." And in our war, it was let's stay alive. And of course, we didn't have the press waiting there to make problems for us if we did something a little bit cruel. And after a while, you get pretty cruel because you're living like a savage. And so it was like you said, it didn't matter what he was. If he was in combat, then he was a target, and we went on and did our job. So.
Now, did you come across a lot of the SS at any
Yes, sir.
time?
Yes,
Where did you
sir.
come across the bulk of the SS?
At the bulk of the SS came right where I'm talking about, Malmedy. After the Malmedy massacre, we were given unwritten orders that we wouldn't, the 1st Division had already taken 150,000 prisoners. We were given orders that the 1st Division will take no more prisoners. Audible, no message come down in writing. So I look at the guys and I thought, this is going to be tough, because, you know, when they wave the flag and want to come in, you offer them a cigarette and keep going, and instead of one, there'd be two, and then there'd be 20, and there'd be 30 or 40. And that's wonderful. That's taking that many guns out of, and all at once we're not supposed to take prisoners. And I thought, well, we'd do this in our own way. So we would take the prisoners, bring them in like always, and smile at them and give them cigarettes, and then we would take our trench knife. They'd all be like this, and we'd take our trench knife and slit their clothes right here. And if you had the SS tattoo here, we would say, you go over there. And if he didn't have an SS tattoo and he was just Wehrmacht, we'd set him here. And then when we got all done with all this, and we would get one of them that spoke really good English, and we'd explain that you guys will be sent to the prison camp. We'll have people come up here and get you, and that's where you'll go. And then the other boys, we just sent them to glory. They went on a permanent holiday. So that was because they were the ones that killed our boys. But only they were cowards, because only when they had the upper hand, then they made a mockery. It's like these ISIS kids are doing now. They didn't cut heads off, but they shot them in the back of the head and buried them with a bulldozer at Malmedy. And 7 of those boys were 1st Infantry Division boys. At least we were told. There might have been more, but that's what I was told. And 1 would have been enough. So that was our orders, and I was proud of it. And so from then on, we weren't very gracious with the SS.
So for these SS, were they a different type of soldier than the Wehrmacht? Did you see something different about them?
Well, what they were was just a cocky bunch of kids who, because they were SS and because they were told how mean and how tough and everything they were, that's what they thought they were. But unfortunately, ran into a bunch of us slum kids that didn't know any better, weren't technically as good as them at war, because we had never trained since we were 12 years old, but we were too dumb to quit, and they couldn't understand that. If we could get their leaders, they didn't know what to do. They were like a flock of chickens running around. They could shoot everybody we had, and if there was 2 guys left, those 2 would give them a battle till the end, you know. And so I guess the best way to say it is they could outthink us, they could outfox us on certain things, but they couldn't outfight us. And that was our 1st Division motto. Was always no task too difficult, no sacrifice too great, duty first. And we lived with it.
Did you have that hometown spirit? A lot of boys were from all over the country, and you were put together with them.
Yeah.
In the platoon, in the company,
Yeah.
and you're with these guys, and everybody depended on each other. Was it like a team spirit? Like, you know, baseball was everything in America. Everybody wanted to know who won the World Series or what was going on. But you guys, as a band of brothers together, you were really brothers.
It came easily because what would happen is the guy would get hurt, and they would see how we took care of that guy, the replacement comes. So then they started, they would take care. We never left anybody behind. We did everything we could to keep them well, keep them alive, and stick with each other. And the first thing you know, you didn't know you were doing, but all at once you were tied to that group. When I was first offered a field commission, a battlefield commission, when you get a battlefield commission, you have to leave your organization and go to another, usually to another division. And I said, well, you know you're going to get killed anyhow. I said, I'm going to, in my own mind, I'm going to go with a bunch of strangers and start this all over again. I'm going to get killed over there. Why don't I get killed here? So I just said, no, I don't want a commission. But near the end of the war, they said, okay. And I got my commission anyhow. But it was, you get awful close. I mean, too close. Sometimes you wish you didn't like them. I know them so well or something, because you have to contact families and do things.
Where the Big Red One made its drive, did you ever come across a concentration camp?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember the name of the camp?
Well, we were across a few of them, but I can't remember all the names. The first one we came across was a total surprise. After that one, when you came across one,
Was the big red one the first unit that went into this camp?
The one I'm talking about now, it was a relatively small camp compared to the big ones that you told me that someone that was here that was in the camp.
My mother.
Yeah. See that we didn't. Well, I don't know. Maybe she. What one was she in?
She was in Auschwitz,
okay.
in Poland.
We didn't. Yeah, we didn't get that one. But the one we got first, it was getting near the end of the war. It was probably, I don't know where it was. Anyhow, it was getting near the Czech border, because sooner or later we were in Czechoslovakia. And we came up to this building, and it was evening, and the building was all closed. It was a wooden structure, and it didn't look like much, and there wasn't fences around or anything, and so we couldn't figure it out. In my own mind, I thought there was just a place that the German soldiers went in to spend the evening, because they like to sleep under a roof. We never had a chance, or very seldom. So anyhow, I thought, uh-oh, this has got to be full of a bunch of Germans. And there again, if you're a platoon sergeant and you want to respect your men, you do things. So I'm the one that's going to kick that door in and see what's going on. So I threw my Thompson sub down and kicked the door in. And when I did, the first thing I saw was a body that just looked like a pile of bones. And he wanted to hug me and stuff. And here come all the rest. They turned the light on, and all the rest of them come. The stench, it was unbelievable. I was almost sick to my stomach before the other guys got in there then right away, of course, because they expected when that door went down, they all came in. And we all just stood there and looked at each other. We never saw anything like it before. They were sleeping, just thrown together, and they had nothing. It was just terrible. We gave them, and we had very little food. You might have a can of Spam if you were lucky. You might have a candy bar or something to come up with the K rations. We gave them everything we had, and then I called Grave Registration, was the only ones I could get on the phone, and I said, this is different. Send somebody up here with food, please, and we'll overtake this place and go on, and then you'll be safe to bring trucks up. And they said, okay, and I guess they did. That was the first one, and then after that, the next one, we knew what we were getting into when we saw it, because it had a fence around and all the other stuff. So the first one set us all back on our heels. We didn't think people could treat other people like that. And again, you're just a kid, 19 or 20, and you learn quick that the world's not like mom and dad were at home. So.
And this was in Czechoslovakia, or just on the border?
I wouldn't say it was just on the border, but it wasn't far from there, because the next thing you know, we were asked to make this the Central European pocket. Supposedly had 150,000 Germans in it, and the 1st Division was given the challenge that if you can surround this, at first, and then I forget who else. Anyhow, if you can surround this and we capture or get the surrender of this, the war will end. And it really did. So with that motivation, we rode on tanks too. And that was tough. You had 3 or 4 or 5 guys hanging on a tank, and then they would hit a roadblock, and then we'd get out and fight the Germans that was there to stop the tanks, and then the engineers would clean the road, and here we'd go again. But we made that big circle, and then those people that was in there surrendered. And that was in early May, and on May the 7th was when we got the word with that old stone-looking telephone like a brick that the war was over, but stay in a combat, stay like ready for combat, because we don't know if the Germans got the same message or whether they got it at all or whether they're going to fight anyhow because it's their homeland. So we stayed combat ready, but that was the end of the war, May the 7th.
So your war basically ended on the Czech border?
In Czechoslovakia, Graslitz, Czechoslovakia is where we got that telephone.
Could you repeat the name, please?
Graslitz, 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 Czechoslovakia is where.
Was that considered part of the Sudetenland?
Yes, yeah, it would have to be, yeah. So.
And you got to meet some of the Czech citizens, or were there Germans living in that particular area? Because Czechoslovakia comprised of an area called the Sudetenland that Hitler took over in 1939, and that was a big pocket of Germans who were living in that area, and Hitler said, these were my citizens, therefore I have a right for the Sudetenland.
And they treated us cool at first. We were only there 3 or 4 days, because when the war ended, they sent trucks for us, and we thought we were going home, which was a joke. It didn't work. But anyhow, we were only there 3 or 4 days, but we took houses and made them our headquarters, and those people moved into other houses. And before the third or fourth day, right, they were coming out on the streets and talking to us, and those who could speak English brought their friends and explained what we were saying, and of course it was mostly women and children, because the guys either didn't want to talk to us or they weren't there, or they were in the German army, because when Germany captured it, first thing you know, those guys were going to be in the German army. So it was mostly women and children, but they treated us nice after a couple, 3 days, and then of course we got back to Nuremberg is when they told, when the trucks came, they said, "Get your guys ready, we're going to Nuremberg." I said, no, we're going to Bremerhaven where the ships are. I thought the truck driver didn't know what he said. He said, "No sir, we're going to Nuremberg." I said, "Get out of here." So I'm telling you, that's where I'm supposed to take you. So we had truckloads of us and took us back to Nuremberg.
Tell me about Nuremberg and your experiences in Nuremberg.
Well, it was wonderful, because after the war was over, anything was wonderful. But when we got there, then we realized that the war in Japan, was still going on. So we were told that our job now is to bring recruits we're getting from all other phases of the Air Force, all other parts of the Army are coming into the 1st Division, and you guys are going to train them to get ready to go to Japan, because we've been alerted the 1st Division's going to Japan and you can't go home now just because you have enough points. If you had so much battle, you're not going home now, we're going to train. And I said, "My guys aren't going to train." They said, "Yes, they are." Well, we did that, and then we're only there a couple of days, and they said that the higher-ups felt that the prisoners that were there, which is the 21 big defendants plus another tier of lesser defendants, which were also bad people, that these hundreds of thousands of Germans who were at home, now this is people above us are thinking this, maybe indeed something could happen. They could go into maybe try to kill the prisoners or maybe try to release them because they were their heroes. And they said we thought it would be better if the infantry was put in there. So they painted our helmet liners white, they gave us white web belts, and they put us on guard so that it looked like the MPs were still there, and they relieved the MPs, and then the infantry took over the guard duty. And
do you have any pictures of yourself in Nuremberg?
Yeah.
Dressed as an MP? Or as a guard?
Yeah, I usually didn't wear that stuff except while I was on duty. Yeah, there'd be some there somewhere. But anyhow, we did that duty, and we would be on A, B, and C company. 142 men were posted on guard duty every day. So A company would be on day, B the next, and C. I was in Baker company. So every third day, my troops would, at 5 o'clock in the morning, we would take over the prison guard for 24 hours, on 24. Then we're off 48, but the 48 we're off, we're training, constant training's going on with these. We were getting hundreds of recruits in. And they weren't recruits, they were people from other phases of the Army, but we were training them in combat warfare. And we did that then on our 2 days off. And then you go back on guard duty for 24 hours and then back. So for 19 months, every third day I was, then other things happened to cause me to stay there.
Tell me who you met when you were in Nuremberg. Which Nazi officers, high-ranking to the lowest rank?
The biggest and the most well-known was Hermann Göring. He was in cell number 1. Cell number 2 was Hess, Rudolf Hess. He was flaky. He wasn't mentally right. When he was right, he was intelligent but very withdrawn. But he was usually taking paper that we'd had 8 by 12 pieces of paper that they could make notes for the trial. He'd fold it in little pieces, get it about an inch square, and then he'd pile them up like this and go and blow them off the table. Just stuff like that was making my guards crazy. They said, this guy's making me goofy. I hate to look at him. But anyhow, that was Hess. Across from him was my worst enemy, was Julius Streicher. They called him the Great Jew Baiter. And he was an evil person.
Did you ever have any words with him?
I heard him.
I
heard him.
Can you tell me about it?
Yeah.
We can do this now. It's years after.
Yeah, I'll tell him. I'm all right now. Actually, he ran around his cell naked when he was down there and told my guys how the Germans were the sexists of the world, that my guy, whoever was guarding, so you guys don't know how to have sex. And he did all kind of crazy stuff, and it would drive the guard goofy. So he'd say to the runner, "Go over and get lucky." So they'd come over to my cell. There was a cell block here, and then there was this big round place where food and stuff come up, and then my people would get it and take it in. And then we'd go out of that, over this way was another cell block, and that's where our offices were. Mine was the first officer.
Do you remember the name of that particular prison? Did it have a name?
Yeah, the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg. This is where the war crimes trials were. So anyway, the runner came over and said that Streicher's having one of those days again. He's making the guard about half crazy. This was pretty late in the evening, 7 or 8, 9 o'clock. Late because they'd been down from the courtroom for a good while. And I said, he'll be all right. Well, he come back again and said, the guard said he's goofy, somebody's got to do something. And I'd been listening to this for so long, and I'd go over and tell them to shut up and sit down, and they all spoke English, but Streicher was an idiot. He spoke it with a bad accent and pretended he couldn't speak it as well as he could. He wanted to hear more than he wanted to tell you. But anyhow, I went over and I said, settle down. He started mouthing off to me, and I said, and there was 2 little bars on this 16-inch window. And I said, come here, and he came over, and I reached in and got him by the back of the neck and went like this and jerked his head into those bars. He hit the floor, and I thought, oh my God, I killed him now. My career is done. I was really, the war was over, I lived through it. Now I'm going to be in a constant stock. I'll be with the prisoners of the war or something. And I thought, oh my God. So I told my boy, I said to the boy, no, go take a walk, so I want to talk to him. So I did this, and I called him back, and I said, he's laying in there, and I'm not sure he's all right, but send the runner over about every 15 minutes and let me know what's going on. So he finally got up and everything, but unfortunately when he went up to the courtroom the next day, he had this, so he gets up there and someone said, what happened? He said, I beat him up. So Colonel Lupinesi came down, who was in charge of things there, and he said, lucky, and we'd been in combat together, Lupin. He said, what did you do to Streicher? I said, Lup, he's goofy. He said, I know that, but what did you do to him? I said, he was over there talking about crazy stuff and running around naked like he usually was and just doing crazy stuff. And I said, you know how he is. He bounces his head on the wall and stuff and goes like this. He said, oh, he said, is that your story? I said, it's the only one I got. He said, well, you want me to? I said, do you think it'll sail? He said, I'll see what I can do. He said, I got out of it. But he had to answer a lot of questions. He said, don't get me in trouble, because we weren't supposed to touch him.
So we knew about Streicher. You had an occasion to have a conversation with Hermann Göring.
Every third day I always did, because he was brilliant. He was cagey. All the other prisoners looked to him for advice when they were on the dock and it was their turn to be interviewed, and they'd look at him and he'd go, for a yes or like this, just hardly move. They all looked to him for guidance. So he knew by far the brightest one. I mean, Admiral Don, well, a lot of them were smart people, but Göring was a genius, and they said the other prisoners would always look to him and tell me how bright he was. But him and I had a problem the very first day, and so we got off on the wrong foot, but seeing him every third day for 19 months, it was hard not to like him. It was because, well, the first day we get there, I go in and I'm the new officer of the guard, so I'm going to go down the line and say good morning to all the prisoners. We're new here, and as you recognize now, up in the courtroom they didn't know it because we still had the white helmets away. But down below where these guys were, they knew their guys because they knew their faces on the cell, because it stood right outside the prison door, one guard on each cell looking in all the time. So I said, I'm the new commander of the guards, and if there's anything we can do to help you and make you comfortable. And of course I'm lying, because we weren't going to make them comfortable, we weren't going to help them. But that was my speech, and I'm going to stick to it. So I go into the first cell, which was Göring, and I make my speech. And he's saying and he spoke English almost without an accent. And I made my speech there, and I'm getting ready to leave, and I looked in, and there was some paper that he had left laying on the floor, apparently when he was preparing something. And I said, by the way, I think I called him Field Marshal because that's what his title was. I said, by the way, Field Marshal, you're going to have to clean up this cell. And man, he snapped his heels and he said, Field Marshals don't clean cells. Now I'm 20, just turned 20, and I thought, I'm smarter than everybody, but I don't know how to handle this. So I was dumbfounded. I didn't say anything. I started to walk away, and my guard had been in combat with me one way, so he said, you're going to let him get away with that, Lucky? I said, I'll take care of it. I had no idea in the world what to do. So I get down, I introduced myself. The next cell was Hess. Anyhow, I worked my whole way down the line. I'm coming back up, and the last one coming up was Streicher, but I didn't know how bad he was, and he was in the 21st cell. So anyhow, I'm coming back up, and all at once there's By then, we went on duty at 5 o'clock. It was probably 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I could smell they had brought the food up into the round complex, kind of the basement. Food services had a business down there, and they brought the food up, and then my runners would take the trays in and feed them because they couldn't go in where the prisoners were. I smelled that hot coffee, and I thought, aha! So I go out into the little round place there. It was a diameter about from here to that wall in a circle where they brought the food up on these trays, or on these carts. And I said, no food in Göring's cell. And the kid looked at me. I said, no food in Göring's cell. And I went over into my office and sat down. So they go all down the line, and about 20 minutes later, the runner comes over and said, Göring's mad. And I said, what's he mad about? He said, well, he didn't get any breakfast. And I said, yeah. He said, well, he's raising hell. I said, go back over and tell his guard, don't worry about it. So I knew he'd be back. So about 15 or 20, I made my morning reports and stuff. About 15 minutes later, the guard comes back in and said, they're going up to the courtroom pretty soon, and Göring is really raising hell. Don't you think you ought to go over? I said, yeah, I'll go over. So I go over and I said, understand you have a problem. He said, they didn't give me any breakfast. And I went like this and said, doesn't look like they're going to eat lunch either. And I walked away. Now it was strike one. He had me right away, and I thought, I can't let this sucker be boss because I'm going to be with him till they hang him. So I've got to figure, now my strike, we're even. We're starting off even then because I got him there, except he went up to the courtroom and told him that the commander of the guards refused to feed him. And the old man came down again, Luke came down and said, what the hell happened with Göring? And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he said you wouldn't feed him. I said, yeah. He said, well, you can't do that. I said, Luke, I just did. He said, well, you can't take food away from them. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? He said, well, and he's stuttering around. I said, Colonel, Luke Manny was then a colonel. I said, Colonel, are you going to go in and clean the cell? Well, he said, no. And I said, do you think I'm going to? He said, no. I said, and I'm not going to send that guard in. That boy was in combat. We won the war, you know. I'm not going to send him to clean it. He's going to clean his own damn cell. He said, well, what about the food? I said, I'm not feeding him till he cleans his cell. He said, oh, man. He said, you're going to get me in trouble upstairs. I said, Luke, if there's a better way you know to do it, tell me. But I'm telling you right now, if you're not going to clean it, I'm not going to clean it, and my guard's not going to clean it. He said, okay, I'll handle it upstairs, but don't give me no more trouble. He came down about an hour later. He said, I think it's all right. So I got away with that one too. So I did some dumb stuff, but it worked.
Did you ever meet any of the family members of any of the prisoners?
Only long enough to let them in, make sure my guards knew that they were allowed to go in.
Did you see Göring's wife?
Yes, Göring's wife and child. Yeah.
You did see them. And did you attend any of the executions?
I was there at the day, but I didn't go out. We didn't go out to the execution. They took them out. My guards escorted them out and stuff, and then they took over from there. And then from up in the courtroom, certain people up there had gotten permission to be there, and we saw that they were down there, and then we were done with it. So,
Art, at this time, I can't thank you enough. And I would like the opportunity to meet with you again and continue this. It was wonderful.
Thank you,
and I look forward to seeing you today. I'll stop by, and I'm not going to see you leave today without me saying goodbye to you.
Well,
and that lovely lady of yours.
I'm going to leave directly. I'm going down now and take my bag down. They're already down there waiting for me because I said I'd be in the lobby at 8 o'clock. And then we're going to load the car and take it over there so that when it's over, we get a 10-hour ride. So take off. Manny, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.